The studio lights were warm, almost too warm, washing the stage in a golden glow that made everything feel cheerful and harmless. The band played a familiar tune as Reba McEntire walked out, the audience rising to its feet in a wave of applause that felt more like a celebration than a routine welcome. Reba smiled wide, waving with the ease of someone who had spent decades commanding rooms much bigger than this one. She looked relaxed, confident, comfortable in a space that usually thrived on playful banter and good vibes. Jimmy Fallon greeted her with his trademark enthusiasm, praising her legacy, her voice, her influence, and the way she somehow felt timeless in an industry that moved too fast for most. They settled into their chairs, and the conversation flowed smoothly at first. Reba shared a funny story about an early tour mishap, one that had the audience laughing and Jimmy wiping imaginary tears from his eyes. She talked about new music, about how songwriting still felt like therapy, about how she never stopped being surprised that people still wanted to hear her sing. The crowd leaned in, hanging onto every word. It felt like one of those interviews that would be forgotten by tomorrow morning, pleasant and easy, the kind that made everyone feel good. Then Jimmy shifted gears. With a grin that suggested mischief rather than malice, he brought up a clip that had been circulating online for days. It was one of those moments taken from a longer conversation elsewhere, edited down, stripped of context, and blasted across social media with dramatic captions. Jimmy joked about how the internet went wild, and teased Reba about how she'd broken the algorithm. The audience laughed on cue, some already recognizing what he was talking about. Reba chuckled softly at first, nodding as if she understood the joke. But there was a flicker in her eyes. She explained, gently at first, that the clip didn't reflect what she had actually meant. Her tone was polite, calm, even warm. She clarified her point, adding the context that had been cut out, smiling as she did it. Jimmy nodded along, tossing in a quick joke about how the internet never tells the full story. The band played a soft, playful sound cue. For a moment, it seemed like the issue would pass. Except it didn't. Jimmy circled back to the clip, this time reading a few exaggerated reactions from social media, leaning into the humor. The audience laughed again, louder this time, reacting more to the spectacle than the substance. Reba's smile stayed in place, but it had changed. It was no longer easy. It was careful. Her hands folded neatly in her lap, her posture straightening ever so slightly. She corrected him again, more firmly now, explaining how frustrating it was when people built entire opinions around a few seconds of video. Her voice was still controlled, still respectful, but there was an edge to it, something sharper, something real. The laughter softened, becoming uneven. Jimmy tried to lighten the mood with another joke, something about how he'd be terrified to trend for the wrong reason. Reba nodded, but she didn't laugh this time. She spoke about responsibility, about how words mattered, especially when millions of people were listening. She talked about growing up in a different era, where conversations weren't reduced to headlines and clips. The room felt different now. The playful energy had shifted into something heavier, something more serious. Even the band stayed quiet. Jimmy attempted to redirect, complimenting her strength and resilience, but then, almost absent-mindedly, he referenced the clip once more, asking if she'd ever expected it to blow up like that. It was meant to be casual. It wasn't. Reba paused. It wasn't a dramatic pause, but it was noticeable. The kind of pause that makes an audience collectively hold its breath without realizing it. She looked out toward the crowd, then back at Jimmy. The smile faded just enough to reveal something else underneath, disappointment, maybe, or exhaustion. She explained, slowly and clearly, that what bothered her wasn't the criticism itself. She'd had critics her entire career. What bothered her was being turned into a joke about something that actually mattered to her. She spoke about respect, about listening, about how humor shouldn't come at the cost of understanding. Her words were measured, but the message landed with weight. The audience responded with scattered applause, unsure whether to clap or stay quiet. Jimmy nodded, visibly trying to regain control of the moment, his usual quick wit momentarily subdued. He thanked her for being honest, for speaking her truth. But the atmosphere had already changed. The warmth from earlier felt distant now, replaced by an uncomfortable awareness that this wasn't just another late-night segment. Reba adjusted slightly in her chair, her gaze steady. She wasn't angry, not outwardly. But there was a sense that something personal had been touched, something deeper than a viral clip. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every expression, every shift in tone. Somewhere beyond the studio walls, millions of viewers would later dissect this moment frame by frame. And as the conversation limped forward, it became clear to everyone watching, both in the studio and at home, that the easy, feel-good interview they'd expected was gone. Something unscripted had taken its place. Something real. And it was only just beginning. The silence that followed Reba's last sentence was heavier than any punchline. Jimmy shifted in his chair, offering a small nod, the kind hosts use when they're trying to steer a moment back onto familiar ground. He thanked her again, tried to acknowledge her point, but the rhythm of the show had already slipped out of his hands. The audience sensed it too. A few people clapped, then stopped, unsure if applause was welcome or if it would only underline the tension hanging in the air. Reba took a breath, slow and deliberate. For a brief second, it looked like she might let it go, like she might smile and help everyone move on. Instead, she leaned forward just slightly, resting her hands on the arms of the chair. Her voice remained calm, but it carried a finality that cut through the room. She spoke about boundaries, not angrily, not dramatically, but with the steady confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime learning when to draw a line. She explained that she came on the show to talk about music, about connection, about joy. Not to relive a moment the internet had already chewed up and spit out. Each word landed carefully, without accusation, yet impossible to ignore. Jimmy opened his mouth to respond, a joke half formed, then stopped himself. He nodded again, more seriously this time. He said he understood, that he never meant any disrespect. But the apology felt late, not because it wasn't sincere, but because the moment had already passed the point where sincerity could rewind it. Reba straightened, smoothing the fabric of her outfit, a small, composed gesture that spoke volumes. She thanked the band for the music, thanked the audience for their support. Her tone was polite, gracious even, but distant. When she turned back to Jimmy, there was no anger in her eyes, only resolve. "I think I'm going to step away now," she said softly. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. A ripple of gasps moved through the audience, followed by stunned silence. Jimmy stood up instinctively, as if to stop her, then hesitated, unsure whether that would make things worse. Cameras.